This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Political pressure builds up in Algeria even after President Bouteflika offers to call for early polls if re-elected in April. Diplomatic differences threaten to escalate along the Ugandan-Rwandan border. And the annual session of China's National People's Congress set to begin on Tuesday morning. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, Pebibah Karibe with the day's business headlines. Pebibah.
Thank you, Beatrice. And coming up in business news tonight, Zimbabwe turns to African central banks to ease its dollar crisis. And 6 African countries blacklisted by the EU for poor money controls. I'll have details of those stories and plenty more in just a bit. For now, Beatrice, back to you.
Pebibah, thank you. And let's start in East Africa, where Rwanda has reportedly deployed troops along its border with Uganda. Uganda's privately owned Observer News portal is reporting about the presence of Rwandan soldiers along the Mukaniga, Byumba and Buganza hills. The two neighbors are embroiled in a diplomatic row that followed the closure of the shared border by Rwanda. The two nations have had an uneasy tie since 2000 after the 6-day war that was fought between them in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, let's get you more on this. I'm joined by CGTN's Michael Baleke. He's joining me now from Kampala. Michael, what is the latest situation on the Uganda-Rwanda border, and should we expect the tensions to escalate?
Hi, Beatrice. Well, information coming in this evening also from the security officials that from the Ugandan side who operate around the Uganda-Rwanda border say the build-up of heavily armed forces of the Rwandese side is continuing, and more Rwandan army officers are taking up positions on the hilly areas neighboring Uganda. And of course, this what we also know is that Uganda, of course, operations in Uganda are okay. Uganda is allowing people in and out at their side of the border, but it's on the other side of Rwanda, which is actually allowing only foreigners like Ugandans, Congolese and Tanzanians to cross to and from Uganda, but it's not allowing, it's restricting its citizens from crossing into Uganda. We also know buses, trucks are also not allowed to cross the border from the Rwanda side to the Ugandan side. Also trucks coming in, of course, into Rwanda from Uganda have been blocked from accessing Rwanda. And this is happening at all the 3 border points that Uganda shares with Rwanda. However, there are reports that some trucks have been allowed. These were about 5 trucks, but we don't know exactly what criteria has been used to allow these few trucks to get in. But so what we know is more than hundreds of trucks and traders, drivers are stuck in these 3 main entry points between Uganda and Rwanda.
Take us back, Michael, to the genesis of this tiff, because the diplomatic rift between Rwanda and Uganda has been simmering. What sparked the latest standoff, and what should be done to resolve it?
Well, according to Uganda, last week when the government spokesperson came out and said Uganda's relations with Rwanda are cordial. But, of course, the Rwandese Foreign Affairs Minister came out and said, accused Uganda of arresting, torturing and incarcerating its citizens under dubious charges. Of course, this is over alleged espionage activities. Recently, Uganda deported a Rwandan official who was one of the top officials at MTN Uganda, a major telecom firm here. And of course, she was also these were on allegations that she was spying. And there are allegations, of course, of former Rwandese insurgents who opposed to the President Kagame's government. And the Kigali government believes these people are hiding in Uganda, and Uganda does not want to hand them over. All these are allegations, of course. And, of course, the border closure has escalated the situation. We understand what we know now is that Uganda, of course, summoned the ambassador, the Rwandese ambassador to Uganda to discuss these issues. We know the Ugandan Prime Minister is engaging the Prime Minister of Rwanda. The Ugandan ambassador to Rwanda has also is in the Foreign Affairs Office in Rwanda to try and bring this issue down. But of course, the issue right now is that there are mixed signals coming in, and the principals, who is President Museveni and President Kagame, remain tight-lipped. So we'll wait and see what may happen, but we're getting mixed signals here.
Michael Beleke joining us there from Kampala. Thank you. Now, in North Africa, the Libyan National Army claims that it has stretched its control over the Libyan border with Algeria, Niger and Chad. Since January, the forces backed by the Eastern government have begun a campaign to chase away militant groups in the south. It has also been expanding the Libyan territories under its control. Here's Adil Mahrouri with more.
Officially, the Libyan National Army is in a hunt for terrorist groups in Libya's south. But this claimed chase for militants has helped the LNA to expand control over Libyan territories. They have claimed full control over the borders with Algeria, Niger and Chad, thanks to one loyal ally, Egypt.
Egypt publicly announced its support for the Libyan National Army and backs its fight against terrorist groups in Libya. Egypt has provided huge support to the LNA forces. With this support, the forces have managed to get rid of Islamists in Benghazi, in Derna and in the oil fields. Egypt's help surpasses what is publicly announced. It is undeniable that without Egypt, Khalifa Haftar would not have managed to make such progress.
General Khalifa Haftar's forces may not be far from extending their reach to the western border with Tunisia. LNA has earlier publicly announced its intention to reach the headquarters of their rival government in Tripoli.
One of the main targets of Khalifa Haftar's mission is to reach Tripoli. He did not go to the south to stay there. He is just cutting down the lines of communication and supply to the militias which back the government in Tripoli. He managed to gain the allegiance of the tribes in the south. He has gained strategic advantage by controlling borders with 4 countries.
It is not clear how many LNA troops remained in the cities it claimed in the south. Control over territories in Libya can shift from day to day. So the question of how long can Haftar keep these towns on his side remains with no definite answer.
LNA forces claim that they have entered the South Libyan towns without any resistance from the locals. In Tripoli, however, General Khalifa Haftar has many rival coalitions. Some of them have labeled him a war criminal. Experts fear that if the LNA do march towards Tripoli, that may fuel one of the deadliest clashes Libya could see. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The Democratic Republic of Congo's new president, Felix Tshisekedi, has pledged to free all political prisoners in the coming days. The president made the announcement in the capital, Kinshasa, while unveiling his emergency program for the next 100 days. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more.
President Felix Tshisekedi told a gathering of ministers and foreign envoys that he will free the men and women in order to consolidate democracy in the country. He also promised to allow political exiles to return home. He made the remarks while presenting his emergency program for his first 100 days. Dozens of Congolese citizens were arrested between 2016 and 2017 for staging protests against former President Kabila's continued stay in power after his term had ended. And some of the protesters were activists from Mr. Tshisekedi's political party, the Union for Democracy and Social Progress. Mr. Tshisekedi took over office from Joseph Kabila in January after an election that was disputed by the opposition. He was even accused of making a deal with Mr. Kabila, but both the former and current president have denied such a deal happened. And some observers hope that the release of all political prisoners is an indication that the president will keep his own campaign promises and run the country's affairs independently of Joseph Kabila. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Tunisia's intelligence services have intercepted 19 letters containing toxic substances. The substances were sent to public figures, journalists and celebrities. The Interior Ministry and the Counter-Terrorism Police are now investigating the case. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi tells us more.
Tunisian authorities revealed that 19 letters containing toxic substances were intercepted by intelligence services. After analyzing the substance, it appeared to be a blend that instantly infects anyone who inhales it.
The National Security Services have intercepted the 19 letters after a preventive and intelligence operation in coordination with the Prosecutor's Office at the Judicial Counter-Terrorism Division. The letters were submitted to the analysis of specialized services that confirmed their toxic nature.
The Interior Ministry spokesperson added that the government appreciated the vigilance of the security units that fizzled out the scheme, acknowledging the success of these units.
The special units which foiled the plot have prevented a catastrophe. This proves that the Interior Ministry is ready to act and react anywhere at any time to face current or future terror threats.
The Interior Ministry has called on all politicians, media professionals, trade unionists and other public figures to inform their services about all suspicious objects. The Commission of Security at Parliament has held a meeting to discuss the alarming situation. MPs said that they have been informed by the Interior Ministry to be extremely vigilant while dealing with any suspicious mail.
The counter-terrorism and intelligence units have saved lives and prevented one of the worst scenarios in Tunisia's modern history. Now, MPs, politicians, public figures and celebrities must be careful. They should not open any letter they receive from an unknown source. This is a preventive measure.
The Interior Minister Hisham Fourati declared that sending letters containing toxic substances to public figures is unprecedented in Tunisia's history. The minister noted that if the letters were received, it would have been a disaster. Aden Shouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
The annual session of China's National People's Congress will begin on Tuesday morning in Beijing. The spokesman for this year's event has been briefing the media on what we can expect in the coming days. He also answered questions on issues including the trade war with the United States and the recent U.S. DPRK summit. Who now reports from the Great Hall of the People in Beijing.
It is Zhang Yesui's second year as NPC spokesperson. The former deputy foreign minister once served as Chinese ambassador to the United States. When answering a question from CNN, he said the interests of China and the United States are deeply interwoven, adding that a confrontational China-U.S. relationship does not benefit anyone.
The new issues should not be dealt with a Cold War mentality. Against the background of globalization, China has a clear policy towards its relationship with the U.S., which is based on no conflict and no confrontation, mutual respect, and win-win cooperation.
While the second Trump-Kim summit in Hanoi ended with no agreement, the world is watching China's reaction. Zhang spoke positively about the Hanoi summit and said China will continue to make efforts in its own way.
China believes the Hanoi summit between Pyongyang and Washington was constructive, and Beijing will continue to play an active role in the Korean Peninsula issue.
The national defense budget dominates headlines at each year's NPC press conference. This time, though Zhang did not give a specific figure, he said China's defense expenditures for the protection of the nation's sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity, and does not pose any threat to other countries.
It's seen as a threat by many nations in the Asia-Pacific region.
China's defense spending in 2018 accounted for about 1.3% of our GDP for the year, while some developed nations maintain a 2+% proportion.
Zhang was also confronted with questions on whether the Belt and Road Initiative is a, quote, debt trap for others. He said China takes debt sustainability in Belt and Road cooperation very seriously, that the country would never impose its will on others. Zhang also answered questions on artificial intelligence legislation and the top legislature highlights for the coming year. From China-U.S. relations to the highlights of China's legislation, NPC spokesperson answered 11 questions from the media. And now, all eyes are on how China's lawmakers and political advisors will provide solid solutions to all the pressing problems. CGTN, Beijing.
Now, less than 7 hours away, Tuesday morning is the official start of the National People's Congress session. One of the main events of the day will be Premier Li Keqiang's government work report. We'll have a special coverage starting at 8 a.m. Beijing time. Meanwhile, deputies of the National People's Congress are expected to voice their concerns of their constituents and also convey the decisions made at the annual session to the public. Yang Jinghao has more.
A rainy weekend, Li Yanping travels hundreds of miles to a remote village of Chongqing to see a patient suffering from rheumatism. As a veteran doctor and deputy head of the Mac City's traditional Chinese medicine hospital, Li takes this a serious part of her occupation.
As one of the hospital managers, I need to regulate others' medical practices, and the premise to do this is that I need to set an example in terms of both medical skills and humane care for patients. This is also a basic requirement for me as an NPC deputy.
The 58-year-old took on the new identity as an NPC deputy in 2018, an honor that brings with it some extra responsibility. To get more first-hand information for constructive proposals to the top legislative body, Li has made frequent visits to different towns, speaking with many grassroots medical institutions.
Through medical reforms in recent years, the whole sector has seen massive changes, but still far from matching people's growing demand for quality medical services. I can only put forward good suggestions on behalf of them by staying abreast of the latest situation in all respects.
Li's efforts have been widely applauded. But how to guarantee all deputies at different levels serve people better in an institutional way still remains a hot topic. Now the standing committees at all levels of People's Congress are exploring different mechanisms to urge deputies to better fulfill their obligations, such as establishing liaison offices to streamline communication between deputies and the masses of people. In the town of Xiangyang in southwest China's Sichuan province, villagers have another channel to voice their appeals after such a facility was set up in 2012. Local deputies take record of the advice and issues the villagers bring up and assist them by turning to related government departments. Now, such working modes have spread across the country.
It's of course a good platform. With it, we know where we should go when we need help, especially as it pertains to public interests. Otherwise, we can only resort to government officials directly, who are always occupied with various affairs.
Li Yanping says, no matter the form, listening to people's voices and speaking for them is what she will persist in doing during her term. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Chongqing.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. To stay with us.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's go to Algeria, where pressure is mounting on President Abdelaziz Bouteflika not to seek another term in office. In a letter read out by his campaign manager, Abdelghani Zalani, the ailing Bouteflika said he would call for early elections if re-elected in April's presidential vote. Bouteflika's actual whereabouts and health condition remain largely unknown, even as massive protests against his re-election bid continue in Algeria.
On Sunday, Bouteflika's campaign manager confirmed the Algerian president will run in April's election in pursuit of a fifth mandate, but that he would offer to step down after a year if re-elected. The announcement read out by campaign manager did not appease Algerians who have taken to the streets in the past 10 days to protest against the 82-year-old's plans to remain in office.
Presidential elections will take place, founded on the agenda produced by the National Symposium. I promise not to run for office in those presidential elections. Those elections are meant to, among other things, guarantee the transition of power under peaceful conditions and in an atmosphere of freedom and transparency. The National Symposium will determine the date of the preceding elections.
Protesters turned out in the thousands in cities including capital Algiers, Constantine, Annaba, Batna, Blida, Skikda and Bouria. 6,000 more joined the protests in central Paris, where many Algerians live. The president has rarely been seen in public since he suffered a stroke in 2013 and has for years communicated via letters read out by aides. A Swiss television station said Bouteflika is still receiving care at a hospital in Geneva. Bouteflika has been in power for 20 years, and since the stroke in 2013, he has only been seen in public a handful of times. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Earlier, we spoke to Dr. Ziad Akol, a political analyst and researcher at the Ahram Center for Security and Strategic Studies, on the impact President Bouteflika's decision to run for another term will have.
The elections in this term, in renewing a fifth term, are being judged on two levels. First of all, the health condition of President Bouteflika, that a lot of the Algerian citizens believe that it is not in a good condition for a political leader to lead. And on the second level is basically the fact that there are a lot of files, domestic and regional, that have been dealt with by the Algerian administration of Bouteflika in a very inefficient manner. Therefore, all the popularity of this regime is falling these days in Algeria, and at the same time, while it is falling politically, there is also populist action, populist collective action by the people against the regime that they believe should not be renewed. The plan that President Bouteflika has been saying that he will do, that if he is re-elected, he will resign after 1 year, I believe that there is a lot of social resistance. In case he is re-elected, then why exactly are you grasping on to this 1 year? What will you change in this 1 year? And there is a lot of anger inside the Algerian society, basically because they believe that Bouteflika's regime has created a vacuum within political leadership in Algeria, meaning that today, if you do not have Bouteflika, you do not have any other options, because the regime actually has been trying regularly to sort of liquidify the political elites. Here we have two very important points. The first of all is the position of the Algerian military. We are talking about one of the most powerful militaries in the Arab world, the second actually powerful military in the Arab world after the Egyptian military, and one of the most powerful militaries in Africa. What will the positions of the military be? Will the military stand behind Bouteflika or not? And the other point is the idea of the political elites. What the country should do, the country should I believe, should listen to the idea of the people. It should not, the political regime should not defy the people. Therefore, if the military is asked to perform any violent actions, it should refuse. But this might create what we call military defections. And military defections will create more trouble. At the same time, the political elites, the figures of the political leadership in Algeria, today, they are not in accordance with each other. They are actually in a state of fighting. And therefore, these elites must reach some sort of a combination, whether to support Bouteflika or not. And I believe that the Algerian street will not at any time in these few coming days, it will not be more relaxed. It will actually witness more tension in the coming phase.
South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has hosted visiting Ethiopian Prime Minister Ahmed Abiy Ali and Eritrean President Isaias Afewerki in Juba. South Sudan's government says the three leaders pledged to work together to ensure peace and economic prosperity in their nations. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
The visit by the heads of state for Ethiopia and Eritrea comes just 2 months before South Sudan is meant to form a unity government. It's one of the conditions of a peace deal signed last year between President Salva Kiir and major opposition parties. But there are still groups opposed to the peace agreement, and those groups are fighting against the current government. Now Ethiopia and Eritrea say they want to help bring all fighting factions together in the peace process, and they will consolidate their efforts to ensure this happens. And South Sudan's government has promised it will now begin negotiations with opposition groups.
There's going to be a meeting that will bring together Ambassador Ismail Wise, the special envoy of IGAD to the Republic of South Sudan, with one of the holdout groups that is led by General Thomas Kirillo. This will take place in Addis. That will be followed by another similar meeting with the group led by Paul Malong on the 10th in Nairobi.
President Kiir says his government remains committed to the implementation of the peace deal, and the three leaders have pledged more regional integration to make this happen. But many question these assurances from the government, given the country's recent history. In 2015, a peace agreement failed to produce any results, despite promises from all parties that they would honor its conditions. One of the challenges for South Sudan's peace process now is to ensure the deal doesn't collapse. But history has shown that groups left out of the peace implementation have in the past opted for armed rebellion. And experts argue that unless all groups are included in the most recent peace process, there is a real risk it could fail. To stop that from happening, Juba hopes leaning on neighboring countries like Ethiopia and Eritrea will help end the violence and create a stable environment for South Sudan's citizens. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
To South Africa now, where the country's budding cannabis industry is starting to gain momentum. Recently, there's been an increase in applications for farm licenses and small manufacturing facilities. More cannabis-based products used as supplements or alternative medicine are being imported into the market. As CGTN's Julie Shire reports, the policy around the industry is yet to be drafted.
Just 6 months ago, cannabis in any form was illegal in South Africa. Since the laws around private use were relaxed, it's paved the way for an alternative medical industry. Demands for medicinal cannabis is booming around the world. In Africa, Lesotho is the first country to license the cultivation of marijuana for medicine, and South African farmers are hoping to also cash in on the prized crop.
We've got 28 applicants at the moment, and this is purely for research and export purposes only. In order for you to export, you need an offtake agreement, and this is something that we've already put into place, with Canada, Israel, and the Netherlands. So we'll be producing and farming here in South Africa, but everything that is produced here will be going out to export.
There's been no further change in policy since the watershed ruling in September. But many companies have hedged their bets and done the groundwork on producing cannabis oils, supplements, and other products.
These companies took a view, and most of them have been in existence for the last 2 years, specifically in CBD, and understanding cannabinoids in the medical market, and a lot of health practitioners have been working with the space for a few years.
The cannabis industry seems set to take off in the next 18 months. There's already been a flurry of small businesses sprouting up across South Africa.
Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Environmentalists in Somalia have rallied in the capital Mogadishu to raise awareness about the dangers of dumping waste along the Indian Ocean. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bilo caught up with activists and sent us his report from Mogadishu.
These environmentalists are taking part in a cleanup exercise along a popular beach in the Somali capital. They comprise of university students and volunteers from various environmental groups. Along the beach, organizers have erected a monument to remind beachgoers of the importance of protecting marine life.
The objective is to inform the public that the beach is not a dumpster. It is a habitat for marine life and must be protected. The fish we consume is obtained from the sea, but if we dump plastic bags and bottles in the ocean, they will not decompose but will pose a danger to our fish and marine life.
Several seafront hotels along the beach have been blamed for the high rates of pollution. These students say that regular beach cleanup by the community will ensure the Somali coast remains clean so as to attract local and international tourists and also ensure the safety of the marine ecosystem.
We have collected a wide range of fish and other marine animals that died as a result of human pollution. Most of them ingested plastic debris dumped in the sea. Today, we are here to show solidarity with the ecosystem. Let us all protect marine life just as we protect human life.
Life below water.
We came here to express our support for the environment and life below water. The cleanup exercise today concentrated on Lido Beach by both the university students and environmentalists with the objective of addressing the impact of dumping waste along the sea.
Every other weekend, hundreds come to Lido Beach and many other private beaches all across Mogadishu to spend quality time with their friends and loved ones. But environmentalists say that residents leave behind a pile of plastic bags and bottles that negatively affect the environment.
Within 1 hour of this exercise, we managed to collect hundreds of kilograms of garbage, almost half a ton from the ocean and dolphin hotels. Last year, we also did the same. Collecting garbage is not our work, but ours is just to show the dangers of using the ocean as a dumpster.
With one of the longest coastlines in mainland Africa, authorities have been urged to maintain the country's pristine beaches and invest more in tourism and fishing, two lucrative industries with the potential of reviving the country's economy and creating employment opportunities for young people in the Horn of Africa nation. Abdulaziz Bilo, CGTN, Lido Beach, Mogadishu, Somalia.
On to France now, where wild immersion technology is gaining a lot of attention. The innovative idea allows users to have a close view of wildlife. With this virtual reality approach, it is hoped that animals will no longer be transported from their natural habitats to far-flung zoos for people to watch them.
They can watch wildlife in their natural habitats, be it from Africa, the Arctic, or even the deep Amazon jungles, and the oceans as well. It is a project by Jardin d'Acclimatation, which is Paris's oldest amusement park.
The Wild Immersion project enables people to know, to get to love these wild animals once again, and to feel close to them. We know it is sometimes expensive and complicated to travel and see them in their natural habitats in foreign nations, be it in Africa or elsewhere. Zoos are also not always ideal. We want to use technology to bring wildlife to the people, be it monkeys, zebras, and such.
It was developed in partnership with British primatologist Jane Goodall. The project is aimed at raising awareness on the importance of conservation. But the aspect of almost interacting with wildlife is what thrills the VR users the most.
It was cool. The animals were cute. I would love to go to Australia to see these animals.
But gathering footage was not a walk in the park, so to speak, for former vet Adrian Moisson. Moisson had earlier ditched his calling for a career in advertising. Using 3D cameras, he decided to reconnect with nature and help in saving the planet. However, some wild animals apparently were not so pleased with his adventures. Broken equipment and a hostile reception was some of what he had to endure.
So we found the snake in the jungle. The problem is, he's attacking the camera. So we must stay rather calm and let him be.
His efforts paid off. This project features more than 200 wildlife species from over 40 countries. 1% of revenue collected will be donated to the Jane Goodall Foundation. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Well, let's now go to Pebibah Karibe for a look at the day's business news. Pebibah.
Thank you, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Business, Zimbabwe turns to African central banks to ease its dollar crisis. And 6 African countries blacklisted by the EU for poor money controls.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We begin in Zimbabwe. The country's Reserve Bank has borrowed $985 million from African banks to purchase fuel and other critical imports. According to the bank's governor, the institutions include Mozambique Central Bank and the African Export and Import Bank. Due to the severity of the dollar crunch, the country ditched a discredited $1-to-1 dollar peg for surrogate bond notes and electronic dollars. This initiated a merge of currency into a lower value unit called the RTGS dollar. The loans are expected to be paid back from future gold earnings as the current borrowing stands at $2.9 billion. Gold is the single biggest mineral export earner, accounting for a third of its $4.2 billion earnings in 2018. Uganda is considering petitioning the East African community to challenge what it perceives as Rwanda's economic sabotage in breach of the regional bloc's guidelines. Rwanda has shut its border with Uganda, frustrating the flow of goods and services. According to Uganda's State Minister for Regional Cooperation, they considered the action to be interfering with cross-border trade. Rising tensions and long-standing counter-accusations have gripped both member states. President Paul Kagame is the current chairman of the Regional Economic Bloc. He succeeded Uganda's Yoweri Museveni. Last month, Kigali abruptly stopped Uganda's vehicles from entering Rwanda through Katuna, citing ongoing construction works at the frontier. The European Commission has blacklisted 23 nations having massive deficiencies on their anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing regimes. Botswana, Ethiopia, Ghana, Libya, Nigeria and Tunisia are among the African countries mentioned. According to the Commission, the blacklisted countries pose a risk to the EU's financial system. It adds that the banking and financial sector should exercise caution and scrutinize transactions involving those countries. Banks covered by the EU anti-money laundering rules are subject to increased checks on financial operations to identify suspicious money flows. UK Prime Minister Theresa May has unveiled plans for a $2.1 billion fund to help boost growth in Brexit-supporting communities. The opposition Labour Party is branding the move as a Brexit bribe. The fund has been termed as the Stronger Towns Fund and is seen by May's critics as a way to garner support for her deal from the opposition. In response to this, the Conservative government disclosed the funds are to be used for skills training and to create new jobs in areas that didn't experience the fair share of economic prosperity. The Central Bank of Kenya has opened the sale of a 25-year amortized bond to raise up to $500 million for funding infrastructure projects. According to the CBK, the tax-free bond started selling on Friday with a 12.2% coupon as its auction is set for March 19th. Investors are to cash in between $1,000 and $200,000. Half of the outstanding principal amount is to be paid out in March 2034, with the redemption date dated February 2044.
2024. The bonds offered for the auction received $783 million bids, recording a notch performance of 156.5%. The proceeds are to fund projects in the transport, water and energy sectors. A Saudi business delegation that comprises of executives and CEOs from 100 companies are in Cairo to discuss partnerships with their Egyptian counterparts. The meetings also focus on how both sides can work together on investment projects in Africa. Yasser Hakim has more.
Saudi Arabia is Egypt's largest Arab trade partner and largest Arab investor in the country.
The Saudi kingdom imports 6% of Egypt's total exports, while the Saudi non-petroleum exports to Egypt reached $4 billion in 2018. As for investments, the total investments from the Saudi public and private sectors into Egypt is $54 billion. Since the start of 2019, there are 10 major projects that have been signed and up and under construction as we speak.
Most of the Saudi investments in Egypt are concentrated in the real estate and tourism sectors. But the largest Saudi business delegation to visit Egypt in a while is studying opportunities in other fields, such as renewable energy or industrial production. The Saudi businessmen are not just here to discuss the Egyptian market, but they're also studying opportunities to penetrate the African market as well. This coincides with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi receiving the helm of the African Union in 2019.
Egyptian companies will be leading Saudi-Egyptian consortiums to invest in the continent in various sectors, but focusing more on the industrial sector, services and the agricultural production.
These meetings are considered information gathering, and the delegation is planning a second visit soon to Cairo to sign final contracts. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Giant technology company Apple is set to launch a game subscription service. The company is not commented, but multiple sources claim it's been talking to publishers since last year about a Netflix-type offering for games. How would it work and why now? CGTN's Phil Lavelle reports from Los Angeles.
Take Apple, Netflix, a bit of gaming, DNA, and what do you get? Truth is, nobody knows, not for sure, but the tech world is certainly talking a lot about it right now.
I think it would be huge if Apple got into this side of the market.
Few are privy to what goes on inside Apple's secretive HQ, but behind the glass, apparently, a gaming revolution is being planned.
I think the games are really lucrative and Apple is seeing that.
Multiple anonymous sources reporting that Apple is planning to launch a gaming streaming service, having started talks with publishers last year. The theory is that this would follow the Netflix model, where you pay a monthly subscription and you get access to a catalogue of TV shows and movies, or the Spotify model, where you get the same but with music. Apple's apparent idea to do that with games. All you can play as long as you pay.
I think that they're starting to get into a lot of areas that don't rely solely on the iPhone.
Officially the world's most valuable company, again by some measures, but realizing it can't rely on iPhone sales in a saturated marketplace and when it's not taking over China in the way it had hoped.
The iPhone X is really expensive right now, and people are trying to hang on to that as long as they can without replacing it. And that means that Apple's revenue is going to kind of slow a little. So they're trying to find another way to sort of, supplement that.
Which is where services come in, charging for things like cloud storage, apps, mobile payments, insurance, that kind of thing. On top of that, original TV programming, we know that's in the works, and apparently also a subscription model for its news service, set to launch very soon.
They know that investors love subscriptions. I mean, subscriptions really get investors going when it comes to, putting more money into acquisitions or things like that.
The App Store has been a huge success for Apple. It made more than $1 billion over the holiday season, more than $322 million on New Year's Day alone.
We get a whole new section of gamers that are just untapped and are waiting to be catered to.
Which explains why this could be such a big deal for Apple. Trouble is, there is competition on the scene. This market is already overcrowded. If this is true, and I stress if because Apple never gives anything away, but if it does happen, how much of an impact could they seriously make?
I think that the impact would be seen on what kinds of exclusive games they get. The only way that this could work, and of course Apple is still kind of just exploring their options, would be what kind of games they can offer on their service exclusively. If they can't get the games, then the impact will be negligible.
As always, no comment from Apple. It never responds to speculation. But the company that boasted of this...
Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
Hoping, apparently, to reinvent this too and win. Phil Lavelle, CGTN, Los Angeles.
And that's it for now. But ahead in global business, we review the impact on 6 African countries blacklisted by the EU for poor money controls. That's at the top of the hour. I'll see you then. Beatrice, back to you. Penina, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's coming up. We get you the highlights of the 26th edition of the Pan-African Film and Television Festival of Ouagadougou.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Burkina Faso, the 26th edition of the Pan-African Film and Television Festival of Ouagadougou recently wrapped up. This edition focused on identifying ways to help shape the future of Pan-African cinema.
This year's festival showcased 434 screening sessions in 8 days and 68 other sessions in the outlying districts, a growth in Africa's desire to share its stories. About 200 films competed in the fiction, documentary, TV series, African film schools and animation categories. This year's Gold Award of $40,000 was awarded to Rwandan director Joel Karekezi for his film The Mercy of the Jungle.
This prize is really a special prize. You know, everyone in Africa who makes movie, it's a dream to be in FESPACO. So to win, it's really a plus. So I'm really happy, and for me, it's yeah, it means my movie will be seen, and I really want for this film to be seen by so many people.
The European Union contributed $200,000 to the award ceremony. More than 145 million Africa francs was invested for the official and special prizes.
FESPACO's role is to promote African films. It has become an indispensable step for most African directors who want to achieve international stature. But the objective of FESPACO is that the films are not limited to the festival, but that they can pursue a business life.
African cinema is life in all its dimensions and colors. We are delighted by the strong attendance of festival goers in Ouagadougou, proof of the unwavering support of friends and brothers from Burkina Faso, who share with us the values of democracy, freedom, equality, fraternity, and social justice.
During the screening sessions, many film enthusiasts were able to find a connecting thread in the creative pieces.
The film is a good film. It's from Ghana and it was in English. It was engaging. What I saw in the film is similar to what you have in Nollywood, where you have limited cast, low budget, but it's a good film that tells the African story.
We just watched the tale of a couple trying to walk to catch a train. Watching how the man and woman managed to get on the train was quite funny. The film was very well directed. It has beautiful music and the characters performed very well.
The other top winners this year include Tunisian director Ben Mahmoud, who received the $10,000 Bronze Award for his film Fatwa, and the silver award worth $20,000 went to the Egyptian director Khaled Youssef for the film Karma. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Newly crowned IBF World Lightweight Champion Richard Comey back home in Ghana to recuperate.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
And we begin with rugby action. United States beat Samoa 27-0 on Sunday to defend their Las Vegas title. They saw them move atop the standings in the World Rugby Sevens Series. The team's massive home support was evident again after the final whistle. Pinkelman scored 2 tries, with his second try coming with a minute remaining, followed by Maceo Brown touching down after the whistle. The Americans had thrashed defending World Series champion South Africa 29-10 in the quarterfinals.